Hello, everyone. It is 6 o'clock on Monday evening. I hope you've had as good a weekend as I have. And it is time for another episode of Riding in Cars with Carts. This is the show where instead of talking about the evergreen stuff, the things that apply to all the formats, we're talking about isolated pockets either throughout the history of Magic or currently as things become more relevant. So normally I reserve this space for deck techs and that kind of thing, but there's another thing that I reserve this space for, and that's tournament reports. I don't do a ton of them, and when I have one that's either surprisingly noteworthy or, go to a bigger event regardless of the record, I'm going to talk about it. So, as I mentioned, we've got a comeback story and quite possibly the most bananas thing I've seen in a game of Modern in a very long time. And that includes anything to do with Ogok. So, strap in and enjoy yourselves because I'm going to enjoy telling you about all of this. So, it started Friday. We were planning to take a group out to F&M. That was the plan. But we had to wait for Brett to get in from where he lives. It's about hour and a half, 2 hours from where we are. And he didn't make it in time. They left a little later than they'd intended, and they have, a child. So children complicate timing and schedules and everything. Trust me, I'm aware. But we ended up having to reschedule to play Saturday instead of playing Friday. And I mean, hindsight being what it is, I'm pretty glad about that because this would not have gone nearly as well if we had played Friday night. So for starters, we had to retool Brett's Modern deck because he was playing with the old, slightly upgraded version of Saffron Olive's Abzan Rights from Budget Magic. We'd splurged a little bit and got him Windswept Heaths and Thoughtseize and Inquisition instead of not Windswept Heath and Thoughtseize and Inquisition. And of course, we had his requisite slew of I think 5 Shocklands. It's 2 Overgrown Tomb, 2 Temple Garden, 1 Godless Shrine. And then the core of the deck, the original identity of the deck, was to kind of play as an Unburial Rights deck. You wanted to mill your Unburial Rights off of Satyr Wayfinder or Grizzly Salvage, along with something to bring back, ideally a Siege Rhino, which you were also just comfortable casting on turn 4 is just a 4/5 that blocks everything and helps you win races. But the more we played it, the more we realized it was kind of clunky because for all the good stuff it had going for it, it was kind of slow. It was designed for a different format, quite frankly. It was designed for the Mardu Pyromancer, humans, the grindier format back when it was built. And I had some ideas and I wanted to try some stuff out, and he had all the cards, so we started working. And what we ended up settling into was kind of a Delirium shell that used a small Unburial Rights package. Namely, it was 2 Rights, 2 Restoration Angels, and 2 Siege Rhinos as its top end. And then we were playing 4 Gnarlwood Dryad, 4 Grimflayer, and 1 Ishkana as the Delirium enabler. The only other card we really need to get for the Delirium part of it is Traverse, which is a huge deal. We really need to get Traverse in that deck. Really bad. But I digress. The deck, after the retooling, we sat down and played. We jammed a best-of-3 match. We jammed a couple of best-of-3 matches between it and the Budget Izzet Phoenix I was going to play. It's almost identical, with the major change being the sideboard to what I played the last time I did a tournament report on this show. So I don't want to dive too far into detail other than I figured out a plan for not necessarily beating Graveyard Hate, but at least trying to sidestep it a little bit. That ended up working out a lot better than I thought it would for many reasons that I'll get to in a minute. But we played several matches and it honestly felt like he had a good matchup against me. because his creatures were big. He had the ability, he had card selection, an unreasonably large amount of card selection considering, he's a green-black mid-range deck, but between Grizzly Salvage and Ransack the Lab, he had a lot of the ability to avoid drawing the wrong half of his deck, which is something Golgari and Jund and Abzan tend to struggle with. So we felt pretty good about his deck choice, and then Tim Lee decided to come with us, or at least meet us there and play, and the deck he'd been playing the most, regardless of format, was Blue-Red Wizards in Standard, so we just kind of adapted the deck to Modern and gave him Blue-Red Prowess. Exactly the same 75 as what Brett played the last time we went to Modern FNM. And it had a little bit of spice in the sideboard because we didn't have any of the best cards available. No ley lines, no surgicals, none of the the really exciting things you need against graveyard decks. So we just kind of wanted to be able to do our own big dumb over the top thing. That's what we settled on. So we sat down, we played our first round, all three of us lost. Great way to start the evening, right? Everybody loses. Get that first L out of the way early, let me tell you. It's great. You relax, you're like, okay, it doesn't matter now, we'll just play. We'll just play the games in front of us from now on. You go in, you're like, man, if I can just settle in, I can just, stay locked in, I can go undefeated. And then you take your first loss and you're like, I'm here to play Magic. Let's have some fun. What can I say? I lost to Esper Control in 2 games. The first game saw Phoenix get surgical and Monastery Mentor do a lot of heavy lifting. The second game saw my opponent went Thoughtseize on turn 1, counter my 2-drop. That's what it was. Mana leaked my cantrip on turn 2. And then on turn 3, played Teferi Time Raveler. Well, I killed Teferi Time Raveler, and then it didn't matter because here comes Narset Parter Veils. Like, okay, well, I've got Finale of Promise ready. I got Finale. He knows I've got 1, but I drew the second one. I'm like, he's going to have a counter for 1, but I might be able to resolve the second one. And then he just jams an Ashiok on the board, exiles my graveyard, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not winning this game. Esper Control in that situation is like 1,000% to win. So I didn't want to try to grind it out and show everybody what I was doing in a matchup where I'm probably not winning that anyway. And even if I do, we're going to be going into game 3 pretty close to going into time. And I was not going to start in the draw bracket again. So I took my L. Brett played against Golgari, and Tim played against Hollow One. Both of them lost those respective matchups. The Golgari player is Pablo and was basically playing the exact better version of Brett's deck, like what we want Brett's deck to be down the line. So I can't really knock, him taking the loss there. And then Tim, it's his first tournament. Jitters. He's never played Modern before, really. Like, he's played old formats, and he's played Kitchen Table, where he can play whatever he wants. But it's a big leap going from that to playing your first tournament, and it just had to be Modern because we're on a rotating, well, Saturday's always Modern, I guess. But even if we played FNM the night before, it was going to be Modern too because we're on a rotating schedule. So we all took our lumps early. And it was how we responded to them that changed the course of the evening. We all lost round 1 and all won round 2. So I played against the Hollow One player that had beaten Tim. And it sounds weird until you realize we had 14 players. So one of the undefeateds from round 1 had to get paired down. And it just so happened that Tanner got paired against me. And game one, we kind of got into a little bit of a race, but his turn two Burning Inquiry made me discard Phoenix. And it was off to the races. Let's go to work. Meanwhile, in game two, he opened Leyline of the Void. But at the end of his third turn, my second turn, because I was on the draw. End of his third turn, my second turn, I Echoing Truthed the Leyline back to his hand. Him on 2 lands in play, not 3, missed a land drop. And then proceeded to load my graveyard and get myself in position to be able to just bring back a bunch of Phoenixes and close the game out. And do that I did, and we ended up winning that one in 2 games. Tim played against Ryan, playing a decidedly Ryan spin on a popular deck. The deck in question was Blister Burn. Ryan cut all the burn spells and was playing pump spells. So stuff like Mutagenic Growth, Blossoming Defense, Become Immense, Nonsense. It all rhymes, right? We'll call that deck Get Swole because that's what it was doing. I saw Tim get attacked for 15 by a single Monastery Swiftspear. Assault Strobe did a lot of work. Assault Strobe took game one basically by itself. Become Immense. You go like Become Immense, Mutagenic Growth, Assault Strobe, kill you. Seems good. Seems really good. It was kind of disgusting. So, game two, he ended up winning. I know this because I was sitting next to him. He ended up winning. Tim ended up winning game two despite only drawing 2 lands, and none of them were blue sources. It was Mountain Mutavault, and he won that game because he killed Ryan's only creature and stranded a bunch of pump spells in his hand. It was ridiculous. So they go into game three. They play a really, really tight game three. It comes down to who can top deck action first. And Ryan's got a bunch of pump spells, and Tim's got a bunch of haste creatures and burn. So you tell me who wins that scenario. Brett played against... What did he play against round 2? I can't remember what Brett played against round 2. For the life of me, I can't remember what Brett played against in round 2. Brain fog, bad, yeah. But he ended up winning. I know that much. He ended up winning round 2. Well, then we sat down for round 3, and that's where everybody kind of went on their own way. Because I played against Eldrazi Tron. Brett played against... Again, I can't remember. I can't remember what Brett played against over the course of the night. And Tim played against Allies. And this gave us our most memorable moment of the evening. But first of all, the Eldrazi Tron matchup was really tight. I took a really, really close game one, razor close game one. He had a really strong draw, a double Thought Knot, double Temple draw that just kind of steamrolled me in game 2. And then in game 3, he gets Chalice for 1 and Chalice for 2, and I don't die. Because I had gotten a Young Pyromancer on the table ahead of the Chalice for 2, and was still able to cast spells, even though they would get countered. I was able to cast the spells in order to make tokens to be able to survive the Thought Knot Seer onslaught. And then eventually put myself in a position to win the game via, I had Pyromancer and 3 tokens, staring down Double Smasher plus Thought Knot at 12 life. And this was the kind of the interesting decision point that he made. Because there's 2 lines to take here. You can either send everybody, which is what he ended up doing. I chump block with 1 token, the 1 token I left up. I chump block with the token. go to 2, untap, and hard cast a Phoenix to kill him. The other alternative would be to attack with double smasher until I'm forced to block and then kill me, like win the long game that way. The risk there is if he goes double smasher that turn, there's the potential, since I don't have to block, I can just attack for 5. Yeah, in that scenario, he still wins, right? If he just leaves up the Thought Knot instead of attacking with both, I have the option to, I can play Phoenix, I can attack with everybody, but he can block the Pyromancer, which means he takes 6, goes to 1, and kills me on the backswing. So, little play mistake, and it definitely ended up deciding the match. But, he owned it. He owned it. He stuck with his decision. He declared all of his attacks. I moved to blocks, put my token in front of his Thought Knot, and he's like, "Oh, you just won, didn't you?" So, good sport. Wasn't like horrible about it or anything. And it was a really good game. I know I should have lost that game, but I didn't have to. I never got punished. Never punished. It was a no justice tournament. So, and then Tim, on the other hand, had the moment of the tournament when he's playing against Green-White Collected Company Allies. You heard that right. Green-White Allies in Modern. And it was not in the, no wins bracket. So, do with that what you want. And it's not a good matchup for him because Ondu Cleric, if it survives, is a card that Tim can't beat. If it gains 8 life, like, his deck is going to have trouble punching through and killing. So, of course, he sideboarded into the Spice. And by the Spice, I mean we put the Madcap Experiment Platinum Empyrean in his sideboard. For those of you who don't know how that works, Madcap has you reveal cards from the top of your library until you hit an artifact, put that artifact into play, take damage equal to the number of cards you flipped, and then put the cards back on the bottom. Well, Platinum Empyrean says your life total can't change. So Madcap Experiment tries to deal you damage, but you control Platinum Empyrean, so you take no damage. You just pay 4 mana, get an 8/8 that says, middle finger to burn. And, tells your creature deck opponent that they're not allowed to attack until they kill that guy. Or, until they kill that golem, let's say. And we ended up in a bit of a standoff because Zach only had Path to Exile as a way to interact with Platinum Empyrean. So he didn't have any profitable attacks because why would you? Your opponent can just say no blocks, take no damage, crack back, kill you. Let's not do that. Let's not get hasty there. Tim, on the other hand, didn't have good attacks because Zach was leaving his creatures back, so Tim was running the risk of losing an Empyrean by swinging in. And when I say an Empyrean, I mean an Empyrean because he eventually found the second Madcap Experiment for the second Platinum Empyrean, just in case. And despite losing game 1, and the only unfortunate thing is that this was not game 3. Like, I really wish Tim had been able to steal a game off of him before this happened so that the match would have been a draw. Would have been perfect. But instead, the game went to... The game 2 went to time because Tim was attacking for 25, and it didn't matter. Zach had ended up, over the course of the game, getting all 4 copies of Ondu Cleric on the board, protected by Giver of Runes and double Mirror Entity. If you would like to see this Green-White Allies deck profile in the future, I'm sure I can talk Ryan into doing it. So, Mirror Entity did a lot of work, as did Giver of Runes. Like, it made the sideboarded in board wipe, the Anger of the Gods, like, not feasible at all, because it was not going to sweep anything that mattered. So Zach was just gaining like 40 life a turn while Tim was swinging for like 30 life a turn. Zach ended up in the 500s in life total, but couldn't kill Tim because of the 2 Platinum Empyreans. And they went into extra turn with Zach's entire turn sequence being path, crap, land, go. And Tim says, draw, play some spells, attack you for 40 in the air with, quad Storm Chaser Mage Adelies. And Zach's like, cool, my turn. Play creature. Activate Mirror Entity. Everybody's huge. Or, everybody's an ally. Gain 45, gain 40 life. 48 life. Tim's like, oh, okay, my turn. Attack for 5. Neat. Draw. Creature. Gain 48 or gain 52. It was just the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in a game of Modern. Because neither one of them, they were just sitting there staring at each other like they were both doing so much and neither one of them was doing anything. So that was hilarious. The game ended in a draw at the end of the extra turns because neither one of them could kill the other. And Tim ended up turning a 2-0 beating into a 101 beating. Is what it is. So then we get our pairings for round 4, and I'm playing against Pablo while Brett and Tim are playing each other. And it is a horrible matchup for Tim because, Abzan, removal, sideboarding into the rest of the Lingering Souls. Like, it's just not a good matchup for small red creatures. So we can kind of guess how that one went. I, on the other hand, was playing Phoenix against Golgari, and it was game 1. I'm not going to pretend I won game 1 with anything other than the biggest stroke of dumb luck I've ever had in my life. Short of, marrying the perfect person in the world if she ever happens to watch this. Biggest stroke of dumb luck I've ever had in my life. Because there's lethal on the board coming back at me in the form of a 6/7 Tarmogoyf. And I want to say there was something. As a 6/7 Tarmogoyf in a Treetop Village. That's what it was. While I had Young Pyromancer and tokens, and I had what did I have? No, I didn't have it. Board was clear. That's right. Board was clear. Pablo's at 7, and I look at everything I've got. I've got access to a total of 5 mana. And I said, I really need to draw Finale here. And I draw, and it's Serum Visions. And I cast Serum Visions, and the card I draw off Serum Visions is Finale of Promise. So I Finale for Serum Visions and Lightning Bolt, bring back 2 Phoenixes, kill him. I'm not going to pretend that was anything other than sheer dumb luck. There's no, I set that up perfectly. I had nothing to do with that. My hand was like 2 lands. He had Inquisitioned me the turn before and saw 2 lands. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I feel pretty good here. And then we rip the nonsense and get there. So going into game 2, my Esper Control opponent, I knew, I kind of learned my lesson from my Esper Control opponent. So going into game 2, I knew Pablo, like the Esper Control opponent, actually had access to all the good graveyard hate and would be bringing it in because you don't want to lose to the Phoenix Cheese. So I did what any completely insane human being would do in that situation. I boarded out the birds. I went down all 4 Phoenixes, down both Finale of Promise, and down a Thought Scour in anticipation of seeing cards like Grafdigger's Cage and Leyline of the Void. And I went into the second Crackling Drake, 2 copies of Chandra Acolyte of Flame, 2 copies of Saheeli Sublime Artificer, and 2 copies of Narset Parter of Veils. There's a couple of reasons for that. One, Planeswalkers are harder for him to interact with. Chandra on her own on a board that is relatively simple, relatively tame, I can just keep chunking in for 2 every turn and make him do something about it. To say nothing of like if he doesn't have the cage like he didn't in the game, it gives me the ability to play, reuse my spells without having to spend extra mana, which means I can leave up interaction instead of having to just turbo through everything. Well, then the Narsets were just a way to make sure, to mitigate some of the issues we tend to have, namely mana flood and the ability to just find a key piece late in the game. While Saheeli was an additional threat, Crackling Drake was an additional threat, and then the other additional threat in the main deck is Terramander currently. It needs to be Thing in the Ice, but I don't have Thing in the Ice yet. So it's Terramander. And I figured early on that I was going to be in for a long game. So Pablo plays Scavenging Ooze on turn 2. I cast Lightning Bolt. He plays Tarmogoyf. I cast Chandra Acolyte of Flame, flashback my Lightning Bolt, which shrinks the Goyf to a 2/3 and kills it. He uses Treetop Village to kill Chandra. And then the entire rest of the game was just me playing threats until he ran out of answers. The unfortunate thing is in game 1, Pablo didn't draw a lot of lands, and then in game 2, Pablo didn't draw a lot of pressure. He drew plenty of disruption, plenty of removal, but he didn't draw a whole lot of things to keep pressure on me. His second real threat, it was he saw Tarmogoyf, Treetop Village, and then the second Goyf later. That was it. Over the course of a very long, I say it's very long. There was an Ashiok involved. That was the other. As soon as he killed Chandra, I untapped for Crackling Drake, and he goes, fetch, Fatal Push, Ashiok, exile your graveyard. So I was very happy in that moment that I did not keep in Phoenix or Finale. But I eventually ended up getting a Terramander adapted, which forced his hand in removing it. I played the second Crackling Drake, and it forced his hand in removing it. With he ended up having to Field of Ruin in order to trigger Revolt on Fatal Push. He Inquisitioned a Saheeli out of my hand. But Young Pyromancer just kind of sat there and built up some bodies, and we just kept chipping in for little bits of damage. I was more worried about killing him than I was Ashiok. Because from my seat, I knew that Ashiok was not the way to win this game for him. I wasn't going to let him in on that, but, I knew that Ashiok was not what was important here, so I was just going after the life total. And eventually, late in the game, I found myself in a position to be able to close it out. I just, we got there. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't remotely pretty. The ending turn, the turn that won the game was, he was down to 3, and I had Pyromancer and a token. I cast Narset, -2 Narset, and find Vapor Snag to bounce his Goyf so that I can attack for lethal. With the body up in case he was able to remove the Pyromancer and I could attempt lethal again the next turn. So it was a really good drawn out game, but I'm not going to pretend I won that game with, I played the best I could given the information that I had. But I gotta acknowledge that I got really fortunate. And speaking of getting really fortunate, when the tiebreakers were announced, or when the final standings were announced, apparently the undefeateds had cannibalized so bad that I had just played against the last one. So I ended up winning the thing. I didn't even know I was playing for first, but there it was. I had no idea. So we ended up getting the W. So let that be your lesson. That's the best analogy I can draw here is the tired old football cliche. Take it one game at a time. That's what I should have done when I first sat down in the building, but it's what I did after losing round 1. I just sat down with the intention of trying to win the match in front of me. Because if I did that, there was a chance that I could get something back for what I paid for entry. All I got to do is win the games in front of me. Play tight, play smart, make sure you know what you're doing. Get it done. And we did. So Brett finished 2-2. Tim finished 1-3. So we all started 0-1. I turned 0-1 into 3-1. Brett turned 0-1 into 2-2. And Tim turned 0-1 into 1-3. Which, sniping a win off of a good player who builds wild, crazy decks that are hard to predict, and being responsible for the biggest utter nonsense moment of the evening. Like, I got to give it to you, Tim. You did a good job. But that's going to wrap up this week, everybody. The prize support, I had a choice between 13 packs or $2 a pack in store credit. I took the store credit so I can continue to play for free and accumulate store credit through local tournament success. Keep supporting the shop that way. So, thanks everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Next week, we are going to revisit one of the decks we did early on at the request of one of the viewers. It's going to be the Blue-Black Terramander. I've updated it post Core 2020, and it is an absolute blast to play. I highly recommend it if you are looking for a standard deck that is going to survive rotation. Stay tuned. That's what's going to be coming up next week on Riding in Cars. On Thursday/Friday, we're going to be talking about the net decking debate on Homeward Path. So stay tuned. We'll catch you later.